Just about ready to get started. I think there's a couple more people trickling in. Thanks for hanging in there and staying past all that terrific food. That food was really good. Did you guys enjoy it? Yeah. So Neil here, this is Neil's Arcata High School Culinary program. Neil was the one very much involved in getting that food together for us and making sure that it was really kind of some of the appropriate sorts of things for us to eat tonight. We had the Swedish meatballs, which was Marcus's recipe. We had, what else did we have?
We also had the chicken wings were Marcus Samuelson's recipe, as were the ginger cookies. They're all three of those items were from we just Googled Marcus Samuelson. Picked a few recipes and went for it.
Great. And then the pumpkin bars were from one of the recipes from My Family, My Flavors.
Yep. The pumpkin bars and the albacore may look kind of familiar to you from the video or from the movie.
It's good because we were all hungry for them and you provided them for us. Great. A couple of things I wanted to remind you about was one of the things that Katie mentioned to me was pbs.org/foods. They have a lot of recipes out there and might be some things that you want to take advantage of. So if you haven't checked it out yet, pbs.org/foods. There's also a survey. Looks like some of you have it in your hands. If you could just take a few minutes to fill it out, that would be great. First of all, I have on my list here, introduce yourself, because I don't know a lot of you people. But my name's Jennifer Bell, and how I kind of connect with all this food stuff is that for the past 10 years, I hosted a radio show on KHSU that was called Food for Thought. And over the past 10 years, I've interviewed over 300 people locally about food. So they were anywhere from people who were ranchers and fishermen and farmers and food manufacturers and caterers and all kinds of different people that were involved in food. And it was really a great opportunity to meet a lot of people. I always loved being able to be like super nosy, like you'd meet somebody who was doing something with food and I'd go, you know, I got this radio show, do you mind if I interview you? And then I could ask them all the questions I wanted to ask. So it was great fun to do that radio show. Unfortunately, last year, I'm sure a lot of you know, in April of last year, KHSU no longer carries local content, and that's been a real disappointment to the community, I know, and for myself as well. So we have continued to do the radio show and other stations. Another thing that I've been really involved in, we for years doing that radio show, we talked about, myself and Jessica Eden, who's the co-producer, that we talked about, wouldn't it be great if we put some images with some of those audio stories and created a film around food? And so we produced recently 2 films that have been showing around town, one called Coastal Foods, Sowing the Seeds of Sustainability, and the other one called Going with the Grain. And the Coastal Foods film is about stuff that is going on here on the coast, you know, a lot of the foods that are grown here, that grow year-round, that do really well, some of the things happening with native traditional foods, and also youth in agriculture. So really, you know, if we don't have young people involved in agriculture, our future is bleak for eating well. So really what, you know, all these different programs that are involved in getting young people involved in food and farming. So I was involved in that, and I also am one of the founding mothers of the Master Food Preserver program for Humboldt County. So I don't know if any of you have experienced any of those demonstrations. Yay! Love those Master Food Preservers. So what we do is go out and teach people about food preservation. So how do you safely can albacore, some of that great albacore we saw in the film today. So how do you do that? You know, how do you make kombucha? How do you make sauerkraut and all these different sorts of things, jams and jellies and low sugar jams and jellies. And so I've been very involved in that as well. So that's kind of how I fit into the idea of a food panel and talking about that sort of thing. I think I wanted to mention also, when you think about food and you think about culture, of course, in this area, you have to think about Native culture. And so you have to think about all those great foods that Native people have shared with us, from the berries to the salmon. Is there anybody here who's eaten salmon, Pacific salmon? Raise your hand. Of course, we've all eaten it. That's a very traditional food for this area. Acorn and eel and seagrasses and all kinds of different things that are available in this area, and those are very traditional cultural foods for Native American people in this area. Also, I think about this area, I think about a lot of Portuguese people, a lot of Latina people, and lots of different cultures in this area. And so it's just a great opportunity to watch this film and think about people sharing their traditional foods. And I also think about, too, how it's almost like scary in a way to share your traditional foods, because it's like your firstborn child, and you're like, I hope you like this. You put it together and you put as much love and caring and great ingredients into it, but then you really hope that people like it. And so it's just a way for you to share your culture and a way for people to then receive it on the other end. And I think it's a great starting point for a lot of conversations and great relationships. I think we're really lucky here, too. I just want to mention, you talk to people and they talk about how great the Portland food scene is, and they talk about how great San Francisco is. Well, right smack dab in the middle of those two is us. And so we get the best of all worlds here. So we've got the best, produce, and we've got the best, fruit in the summertime, and all the meat products and all the seafood and just everything that you can possibly imagine. The Pacific Northwest is here. So I think we're really lucky that we have a lot of great ingredients to choose from. I want to also mention one of the things that I was thinking of as I was kind of thinking about coming down here tonight is the idea of, those traditional foods. So many people my age that I talk to, they say, I didn't pay attention when Grandma was making that favorite dish of mine, and I lost that recipe. And I think about how sad that is, and just so many people saying that they just didn't take the time to get that family recipe. So I think that this film also reminds me of that, and it reminds me of how important that is. And I would like to encourage all of you, if you're a young person, to take this time now to ask some of the older folks in your family who make the thing that's really special to you to share the recipe with you, and maybe also sit down with you and teach you how to make it. And vice versa, I'd like to ask the older people in this audience to do the same thing, is to write down some of your family recipes step by step, and then encourage the younger people in your family to come over and learn how to make these foods. I think that's just really important in keeping these foods and these cultural traditions alive. So we have a great panel here. It's not just going to be me talking, but I had stuff to say, so I had to say it. So we have great panel members here. We have Wendy Chan. I don't know if all of you know Wendy. Wendy has done a lot of work in teaching people how to fix, how to prepare, how to learn how to cook, has taught a lot of young people how to cook. I met Wendy. So I met Wendy because I bought a whole hog. And I had bought a hog in the past and discarded the head and all the organ meat, and I just really didn't know what to do with it. I knew that historically people in my family knew what to do with those things, but again, it was one of those traditions that had been lost over time. And so I had mentioned to Henry Robertson of Henry's Olives, I said, do you know anybody who knows what to do with these sorts of things? And he said, you need to talk to Wendy Chan. So I did, and sure enough, I showed up at her house with a box with two little pig heads sticking out of it, and lots of different organ meat bags stuck in it. And she was able to hook it up with people that she knew that knew how to prepare those sorts of food. So that's my connection with Wendy, and so happy that she's here today so she can talk about her work in sharing cooking skills with lots of other people. I think you all recognize Vanessa Pacheco. Vanessa is the winner. Yeah. Absolutely. So she made the wet burrito in the recipe. in the film. So Vanessa's here, and she's going to also share some of her insight about young people and cooking. And we have Rolin. And Rolin is a student in Neil Kalson's culinary program. And so he's also going to talk about those sorts of things. And then we have Neil here, and he's going to share some information about the culinary program at Arcata High School, what that looks like, and what students take part in that. And we have Ivy North on the end, and she is one of the people that works with the North Coast Growers Association. And if you don't know what that means, it's that farmer's market that you love so well. That's the North Coast Growers Association. And so Ivy works with them and makes sure that we have those great choices in produce every time we go out shopping at a farmer's market. So I'm going to start with just finding out from each of you, what are some of your first memories of cooking and who inspired you to learn how to cook? So Wendy, would you like to start?
My first cooking was when I was in China. I grew up in China and in a farm. So my parents, they are farmers. And then when I was a teenager, I just fascinated with all these like livestock from the field and vegetables, like anything that we grow. So my mom and dad, they would come home after work and they always cook and make sure we have good food. But when I was 15, and then we hardly have any money, but I saved enough money to buy my first cookbook. So I start cooking all those fancy stuff, like, just follow the cookbook. And then my parents come on like, how do you learn how to cook this? I said, why just read the recipes? And then I start cooking. So I was 15, but I could have started much earlier, but never have a chance. So ever since then, I always interested in cooking. And since I moved to the state when I was 17, and my parents work in a restaurant, so I have more chance to, to get into food, but not really in the kitchen because I was always like a busgirl outside. But I always like to go in the kitchen and watch what the cook's cooking. And then most of the food is more like American Chinese, but ever since I, work in a restaurant, I have been, 30 years now, so I always interested in the cooking. Yeah, thank you.
Vanessa, how did you first get your start in cooking, and who helped to mentor you along?
Definitely my mom. She was always the one cooking at the house. And her sister as well, since I grew up with her sister as well. So my mom and my aunt were probably the first ones that heavily influenced my my interest for cooking. And since my mom has been working at restaurants since the early 90s, she obviously developed a love for cooking. And it's something very interesting. And it's interesting because where my parents are from Mexico, they're from Oaxaca, and the cooking style over there is pretty unique. And since she grew up in a rural village, there wasn't really like modern ways to cook. Like there aren't really many stovetops or traditional ovens over there. They cook other foods like in under the wood. I forget what it's called. Firewood. Yeah, and my mom would actually cook bread with her father back in the day, but they wouldn't use an oven. They would use a brick oven. And so I guess you can pretty much say cooking has been a large part of our family and our family history. And now that my mom still works at a restaurant and I also decided to work there too, it's I get an insight more of what it's actually like to work at a restaurant and what it's like to cook many dishes and all.
Okay. Rolin, your mic over.
Both my parents, when I was like little, would cook really good food, and so I wanted to do that as well, but I didn't really know how to, so I didn't. But last year, my friends took culinary, and they said it was really fun, and it, like they learned a lot, so I wanted to, so I did.
We're glad you did. Yeah.
Perfect.
Great.
Yeah, Rolin joined us last year, and he jumped right in, and we gave him a really hard time, and he's learned a lot and come a long way in just a year. So it's been great having him.
Good.
I was inspired, like many people, by my parents also. My parents traveled quite a bit and exposed me to a diverse range of foods and cultures at an early age. But I didn't really recognize that I enjoyed cooking until I was in college, and I started commercial fishing and harvesting some of the food resources that we have in Humboldt County, and then using those resources to throw gigantic food parties. And so I really enjoyed that, and made me curious as to, what level of craftsmanship people, what's the proper way to do this? I was doing it, but what are the techniques involved? And so I started exploring that kind of as I continued to entertain and enjoy that. But so eventually, at a downturn in my fisheries career, I went to culinary school and found out it's not that complicated.
Ivy.
Hi, everybody. It's definitely an honor to be here, and I really support this project that you all are working on. For me, I would say I grew up in a small town in the Sierra Nevada foothills in a really old apple orchard. And so my family took on the responsibility of tending to those trees, of pruning, and making use of way more apples than we could possibly eat. So, being able to make that fresh cider, those fresh pies, all sorts of other food with apple, definitely turned me on to food. And, the food, I definitely was involved in cooking, but I never was all that inspired by the food that we were cooking. We didn't have the access to any great local ingredients. That was probably part of it. And once I grew up and went to school and learned more about what I like to eat and studied more about where my food comes from, and discovered the sorts of foods that I'm really into. I've definitely done a lot of cooking over the years, and I got to work for the food bank for years, and I learned a lot about different people's perspectives and experiences with food, with their families, and with cooking, time to cook, and all the access and privilege that comes with food. So now with my work with the North Coast Growers Association, I get to organize all sorts of programs to make a really good food, a really good local food accessible to everyone.
Great. So I was thinking along the lines, maybe moving backwards, starting with you, Ivy.
Sure.
Could you talk about ingredients and sourcing ingredients and what are important things to look for in ingredients for food?
Well, one thing that I wanted to, when watching those films and thinking about the youth working and cooking, I was really inspired by how impactful these cooking classes can be for all these students, and especially when you pull it back into your own cultural heritage. I know that it can take a lot of work and time to teach youth, these recipes and learn how to love to cook. But one great way that I've seen it be really successful is when you integrate local ingredients. So you're taking that cultural heritage that you have and bringing it into the place that you live now. Here in Humboldt County, we have a really incredible selection of produce and meats and cheeses that we can all figure out how to put into our family dishes. I mean, when you have those traditional family dishes, and your peppers are fresh and your garlic is fresh, it really makes a really huge impact on that food. So I've seen a lot of great success and a lot of inspiration come to kids when they taste local ingredients. I have the pleasure of taking a lot of kids out to farms. I do a program where I teach kids about the local food system, take them to a local farm where they get to do some harvesting and all sorts of other activities, and take them to the farmer's market and take them to community gardens as well. So when you get that firsthand experience, it can make food that much more exciting and that much more real and tangible, and something you can integrate as a part of your life as an activity.
Great.
Yeah.
Neil, I was wondering if you could answer that question and also give people just kind of an overview of the culinary program at Arcata High School.
Well, I'll just go a little bit off what Ivy said, and we've done a couple field trips to local farms, and it's really tremendous. They let us bring produce back, we make sauerkraut, do all sorts of things with the ingredients that they give to us, and the tour, it's really rewarding to harvest your own food, clean it, bring it back, and then, eat it. Play with it, eat it. One of the most rewarding assignments that I have for me in my classes is each year I have my students do personal food history. So it's kind of exploring your culture, your food culture, and it's wide open. Students are a little bit reluctant to explore, write, do anything, especially in a hands-on class like mine. But after some, so I let them really. If you have a particular lunch spot you like to go to with a friend every Friday or something, whatever your food culture is, it's real. I mean, we all have one. We have to, right? So that it's really rewarding for me to read those, and you see a lot of it with my students is they have strong ties to the community, to their family, and it's really wonderful to read. They absolutely hate it, but yeah. Yeah.
They say that, but.
But in my classes, especially my basic class, I'm trying to take the fear of cooking away and then build a foundation. We just spent 6 weeks on rice, different types of rice, but mostly just how to treat it, so they don't starve to death when they leave home. I mean, you can always invest in a rice cooker. But we made rice pilaf, risotto, we made sushi rice, hand rolled, different stuff, fried rice, we did explore. And I think that the students get a lot out of that.
Makes me want to take your class, but in addition, how about sourcing different ingredients for your food?
Sourcing ingredients, well, most often I'm working within a pretty tight budget, and so that's why we study rice for 6 weeks. But recently, one of my former students brought in probably 24 birds that he had shot over the weekend, and we got to explore that. So we plucked them, butchered them, we broke them down, we roasted some whole, we boned some out, we're gonna make stock, we got to taste this really rich, abundant resource that we have. It's not for everyone in my class, and some people are excused from class for sure. But it really that's a powerful thing to recognize that this is how every protein is a living thing. We have to respect it, and you have to learn how to treat it with respect and use it completely. And it's really hard to do also. It's difficult technically, emotionally, and physically. I don't want to too graphic, but there's some aromas and textures that you don't get when you open a package of chicken from the store. But
I think some things should be hard. Some things should be a little hard.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
They should absolutely be hard.
Great.
And so my students are great. They approached it really mostly in a mature way, but they jumped in and did it, and I was really proud of them. Yeah.
All right. Rolin, what do you think about ingredients when you think about making things? How important are the ingredients to whatever you're making?
I think it's really important to use like organic stuff. That's what I only use, I guess, really, because it makes the food taste a lot better. And like closely grown, I guess, like close to Humboldt is also a good thing to use.
Great. Right up my alley there. Vanessa, what do you think?
I think the same as him. And also, to each their own also, but it could also,
I'm wondering, are there ingredients that that you need to source for ethnic food that isn't readily available here? Are there ingredients that you need to bring from Mexico?
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we, there's a lot of like, you can get them online or through food delivery services. And it makes it a bit easier.
What sorts of things are hard to get here that are incorporated in a lot of your food?
Probably some type of Mexican chiles, like the poblano ones or the guajillo chiles, and I forget which other ones. But I think that's about it. That are
Okay.
hard to get here.
Okay. How about you, Wendy? Are there ingredients that I know you, and I kind of know how you operate. Like, you know where the place is to go to get the chicken and the seafood, and you know where the back door is, and you know everybody involved. So share with everybody
Well,
how you
actually,
do that.
like my friends teach me like, oh God, you're the food broker. I was like, okay. So I do have connection with a lot of farmers, and because I grew up in a farm, so for me, things have to be fresh. I know you guys can go to Safeway or Wingo get a chicken, but for us, when I grew up, we want a chicken, we kill the chicken. Sorry, and then. Fish, we just go to the pond and get the fish, and the shrimp, we just go to the creek, we get things really fresh. So for me, ingredients, like whatever I can get from locally, I would come up with the dish. So it's mostly seasonal. So like right now it's crab, so whatever I can find a way to get crab. I say, oh God, I feel like they have crab with ginger and scallions today. So I just go get the crab and I make it for dinner. And then if the fish people call me, oh, I have red cod, black cod, so I say, oh, I'm gonna have steamed Chinese or Thai, whatever Asian food I wanna do. And then I have a lot of farmers, they have all kind of vegetable, and most of the Hmong people, they grow Asian herbs, so they know I like it. So I don't, I just get it. I always make something to trade with people, so like every season I have fresh vegetables. I would combine with meat, like mostly local meat and seafood. So whatever I cook at home is usually very fresh, like almost like in China, but not quite, but it's fresh.
It sounds like, too, you're kind of describing that you're letting whatever seasonal drive
Yeah.
your menu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like even the day, or if people tell me, oh, we have a fish tomorrow, so I plan the menu for tomorrow. So and then I get whatever I needed for the dish today, and then tomorrow I will have it. When dinner time, I will have really fresh food. But it's just kind of small portion. But if I have the restaurant, that's impossible to provide it that many dishes for everybody. But it's perfect for our family that we have fresh ingredients like most of the time, like all year long.
So I thought maybe we'd start here and move our way back, and just the idea now talking about like how do we get young people involved in cooking. And Wendy, I don't know if a lot of people know, but Wendy teaches classes for adults as well as classes for young people at the Jefferson Community Center in Eureka. So what do you think are some strategies for getting young people involved in cooking?
Oh, I have to make it, like, for little kids, have to make it very interesting. Like, I've been teaching them to make dumplings, but not just like traditional dumplings. I will make it into like look like a fish, look like a flower, like, or let them make whatever. So they would come up with all kind of cartoon characters. So I think it's kind of fun for the little kids to do that. And then inside is still the same. It's just the shape is different. So and besides, they can go home and have their parents to do it. It's just make it fun for the little kids. But also try to use like healthy ingredients for the kids to develop, and then hopefully they will really get into cooking. Yeah, for young kids. And I do teach my kid. I have 3 boys, but only the youngest one interested. So every time I go to a teaching class, and he's always there, and he has so much fun with the little kids or even the adults. So I think if my kids can do it, I'm pretty sure the other kids would get involved.
How did the young people, the children, find out about your cooking classes? How did they get involved in it in the first place?
Well, it was from the Humble Foodie, and then I guess somebody would suggest that they need the kids need some cooking lessons. So that's how it started. Well, almost 2 years ago. So, well, it's not really popular. I mean, the kids. Well, I guess everybody have like their busy schedule. So, ended up we have kids. We originally planned to have just kids class, and ended up the adults like, what about adults? So we have adult class, and then we have kids and adults class. So this year I haven't have classes yet, but we just get the fundraiser last Saturday for Jefferson Project. So I already have people messaging me like, when is the next class? So I'm thinking maybe when the weather is a little bit warmer and the kids probably would more like to get out of the house on the weekend. So let's hope probably by April, so I will have more cooking classes like through the summer.
Okay. So Humboldt Foodies, for those of you who don't know, that's a Facebook site, so that you could search that and join that if you'd like to, and then you can find out when Wendy's offering your classes. Vanessa, what are ideas that you might have for getting young people involved in cooking?
Well, okay. Well, I think young people are already heavily influenced by YouTube and television, but also like Wendy is doing local food classes would also influence people into cooking more. And I think when young people get into cooking, it's something really good, because not only are they learning how to cook, but they're going to learn how to cook for other people. And I feel like cooking at home sometimes is the best option, because you'll save a lot of money rather than going out. And also, it's fun. It's really fun to learn how to cook. And yeah.
I like what you said about cooking for other people, because I think there is something in that, and people are so appreciative when you cook something, and so it's kind of one of those win-win sorts of things, and great opportunity to get more experience at cooking.
Yeah, and it also helps people to have special recipes like the ones we just showed.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
a great idea. Rolin, what do you think that people can do to encourage more young people to cook?
I think it mainly kind of depends on like the teacher, because like if it wasn't fun or like entertaining, then I wouldn't keep doing it. But like Kalson or Mr. Kalson makes it a lot more fun in his lessons, which makes it like.
What was 6 weeks of rice like?
I'm not. I
Oh,
wasn't
you
in that
didn't
class.
take that class. Okay.
Yeah, I skipped the basic class because it
Oh,
didn't
that's
fit in my
right.
schedule.
Right.
So I went straight into like level 2, which was challenging, but yeah, it was still fun. So I
Good.
think like, yeah, it mainly depends on the teacher and like the way it's taught.
Important, yeah. Neil, I'm hoping you can answer that question. And also maybe just, I know one of the things that came up when we had the conversation at the library was the idea that a lot of young people don't have the opportunity to take your class because they're on a college track and they just don't have any room in their schedule for it. And what a missed opportunity that is.
I think it is a missed opportunity for them. I'm working to the reason it's not available to some students is because it's not a fine art, so which is understandable. But I just have to introduce some fine art components to it. to make it qualify. I haven't done that yet, but I haven't had a problem getting students to sign up. I think that cooking and food is, very popular. As you know, on television and media, social media, food is very popular. And thanks to Gordon Ramsay, students enjoy being yelled at now. That's why Rolin says it's fun, because I scream at them all day to prove their mise en place, to clean as they go, and to work with a sense of urgency. But really though, I try to cook at least twice a week. I want it to be a tactile class. I want them to take responsibility for cleaning. It's just I just try to keep their hands dirty and keep them moving through it, and try to just
I think it just certainly
challenging,
doesn't hurt that they get to eat.
Doesn't hurt.
Every now and then
It doesn't
in the
hurt that
class.
they get to
Yeah.
eat, yeah, most of the time. Well,
Good.
Sometimes they don't get to eat.
That's okay. Just keep it as that carrot. Keep pulling it out there in front of them. Ivy.
Well, I would reiterate the getting your hands dirty part for sure. From my perspective, the kids that I know, the people that I know that have done really well with upholding cooking traditions and really value cooking, and have that sense of delight and interest in continuing to learn about cooking are folks that really get involved with their food system. Especially if you've put that seed in the ground, which is great to do at any age, and you've seen that plant grow, and you eat it, and you get to pull it out of the ground or pluck it off. It's pretty special, and it tastes amazing, and it really inspires you to cook. And if any of you get out to the farmer's market, or know kids that do, it's joining this culture of healthy eating, the celebration of food, where you're there and you get to share with folks what you're going to cook. Learning how to eat with the seasons can be really, really special, especially when you get to know where your food comes from. Being able to be at the dinner table and have your little kid say, "Is this kale from Jacques today, or is this from Peter today?" And you're like, "Oh, I can taste that." It's pretty amazing to feel that deep connection to where your food comes from, and it just makes it really personal. And I think that helps you integrate that into your life and inspire you to cook more and more.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, it's reminding me of my book club. It's like every food has a whole story. It's like, before you eat, let me tell you where this grain came from, and let me tell you, where this meat came from. And I just have to give them the story of everything. And it just adds another layer of depth to the meal. I just love being able to do that.
Right. We
Great.
love being able to talk about bread, and teaching kids about, the farmer planted the grain and harvested the grain, and then that get processed in a mill, and then it became the bread, and here we can meet the baker.
Yep.
And being able to understand that whole process really makes it
Great.
special. And we even have bread that's grown in Humboldt County here, so
That's right. We do.
we get to celebrate that.
Great. Well, I don't know if anybody else has any questions. Do you have any questions out there? I think there might be an apron in it for you if you do have a question. Let's see. Anybody have questions? There's a question.
Well, I already got an apron, so.
Oh.
But I just went to a zero waste workshop this morning, and as part of the cooking concept, they also talked about the food waste concept. And I'm actually going to take all the food waste from here and compost it with the local worm guy tomorrow.
Nice.
So just know that that's part of the thing that's happening. But climate change, I'm very active in that, and I understand that we can really reduce the energy we use if we cook more collectively as opposed to individually. And I'm just curious how people feel about that, because we talk about cooking for ourselves in our own kitchen, but sometimes if we can collectively cook for a large number of people all at once, instead of having everybody cook in their own kitchen, we're actually sharing food and time with people, and we're saving energy.
I love that idea. I have, thought about how historically that was done quite, almost, exclusively, that you would, all your bread was baked at the local baker, and sometimes, you would bring a pot of something that needed to be cooked, and it was all cooked in the same place. And I love the idea too of, and I've talked to friends about this, we haven't quite, Humboldt being so geographically spread out, this is just going to be my excuse why I don't do it. But because it's so spread out that I have friends that we always talk about, like, when you make a pot of soup, and I can't make a small pot of soup. My pot of soup fills the stock pot to the top. And then I put it in quart jars, and then I'm like, oh, I wish there was somebody I could give them this quart jar, and then when they make a curry soup, they give me the jar of curry, and, then we just do a food exchange or something like that. But I love that idea. Do any of you guys have any thoughts about that? So communal cooking?
That's my favorite thing to do is large format outdoor cooking where, harvesting mussels, fruit, make a giant paella, have everybody show up. That's my favorite thing to do. But, yeah.
Really, I know. My text number is.
Well, every year we have a Humboldt Harvest Festival. My partner and I put on a dinner for friends and family at the beach, and so it's in the fall sometime.
I love that. Also
But
a
anyway,
celebration of
yeah,
place
yeah.
too, as well.
But that speaks to like food as community too. We started a project recently where we're kind of exploring Indian food culture, and had each of the groups make a different curry, and then on Friday we sat down and had set up the tables and we just ate all day, and I thought it was really great. And then I also teach in the OSNAP program at Humboldt State. So once a week I go up there, I show some basic food techniques, but the whole idea is for students who may be displaced away from home to come together, share a meal, and just as a kind of just build community, really.
Yeah.
Not just build community, build community. But I think that's great. Yeah, I think it would be great to do that more.
I like that story about Humboldt State too, because I have memories of going to Humboldt State and eating a whole lot of top ramen and mac and cheese, anything that would fit in my little hot pot in my dorm room, and got invited over to somebody's house for a chicken dinner. And it's not like I didn't eat good food at home. My mom was a great cook and always had 2 vegetables on the table. But I'd been at HSU for a while, and I hadn't had like a real sit-down dinner, and was invited to this home to have that, and it was burned in my memory what a wonderful meal that was, because these people had opened up their home to me and were sharing this really good communal dining experience with me. Yeah, definitely. Ivy.
I really like that you brought up zero waste into this conversation, because it's powerful to think about how everything is interconnected, right? And I think that when you're learning about food and learning about cooking, thinking about things greater than your meal, thinking about, where did this come from? How many miles did it take to get here? Look at all this packaging. What am I going to be able to do with all this packaging? Am I using the ingredients efficiently? Am I cutting things off and throwing them away that I could save for a broth, or that I could repurpose into compost, to be growing more food? And I think that makes the whole process that much more meaningful, to know where it all came from and where it's all going when you're done with it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Any other questions out there? Oh, there's one.
So where did you buy your hog?
Your hog.
The hog? Oh, there was somebody in Arcata that was, the friend of this sort of thing. And they said they had I think 8 hogs that they were going to be growing up. And did I want to buy part or all of one? And I did it. And the one that I did before that, I did from the College of the Redwoods farm, which is down in Shively. I don't know if you haven't been there, and they do an open house, you should definitely go. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, down there in Shively. And so they were I actually took some agriculture classes there at the College of the Redwoods farm. And one of the things we did was they killed a hog and we butchered it. And they were just doing that for the class, but I said, yeah, I would be interested in paying for half of it. And so we ground half of it into ground meat that I turned into sausage, and then the rest, I was able to go, I want my pork chops this big. And he goes, okay, and cut those pork chops the size that I wanted them. It was just such a hands-on experience. But that was the time that I learned also, it was like, What do I do with the kidney? What do I do with the heart? What do I do with all these parts? I had no idea. The head, I know they make head cheese, but I'm like, this big old hairy head, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And I just felt so bad talk about waste. I mean, there was a lot of food waste there because I didn't know what to do with it. So the next time I was able to hook up with Wendy. I still don't know what to do with the head. But I know somebody who does, so definitely rescued that and got that. No waste, right? Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight and I'd like to thank my panelists here. They were wonderful. And yeah. If you haven't filled out your survey, please fill that out. And do keep in mind what I said about, capturing those traditional recipes and writing them down and sharing them with other people if you can, in your family or friends too.
Don't keep them secret.
Don't keep them secret.
There's no point.
There is no point in that, yeah. All right, thank you so much.
Nice meeting you.
Good night.